Dude, I don't know about you guys, but since like everything has been like crazy with the FAA and stuff, every time I fly now, I get nervous. Is
Up
that
until
is
that point, were you good with that?
well, I never thought about it. And then like literally in the last like 2 months, like a plane flipped over and then the fucking helicopter hit the thing. And I was flying out of Reno this past week. Well, I literally like yesterday, and the plane's taken off, and it was just one of those like gah, 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 and you like felt it. And I mean, oh my goodness. It's like I was the first time I've had that kind of anxiety in it. I think probably since the first time I ever flew.
By the way, in a way that ties into today's episode.
Really?
Yeah.
Do it.
Okay.
Well,
so how do you want to do this?
We're all hold on. We're all here. We're doing it. The episode's recording now. You know, it's I don't know where to start with this because like Wayne was a please no.
It wasn't a please no. It was if you can get Roger McGuinn to do this.
Yes.
We were
this close.
No, we had Rory Scovel for this, and then in the last second, but he dropped out. And this is one of those records that's like, you know, it's hard sometimes. It's, you know, and big ups to Emily for trying her butt off to always get a good guest. You know me, if it could be me and Fetty Wap every episode.
If I had known like a few days earlier, there are a million people I know who are huge Byrds fans that, you know, and then as we get into this record in particular, you guys will end up, I mean, I'm sure you've listened to it a bunch of times, but you guys will also sort of find out, I don't know if it's still on the list, but you'll find out why it was on the list to begin with, because this has one of the greatest sort of band stories of how this came about. And I'll start that when you guys are ready. But yeah, I think it's like when we did the Quicksilver Messenger service. It was one of those ones that on its surface, we probably went, oh God. Yeah. But then after listening to it, it was like, oh no, I kind of see where their place is in the grand scheme of things.
But this is a much bigger band than the Quicksilver Messenger service.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And they were very much of the San Francisco scene, but this band in particular, like when we even said like, what, you know, do you want to do this episode? You were like, okay, so is it Mr. Tambourine Man? It was
right. I thought it was that one. I thought it was the hit ones. By the way, in a weird way, I feel like this is like they are the Jefferson Airplane of the LA scene. Am I wrong about that, Morty?
What? We lost him? Nope. Fuck.
Hold on, 1 second. 1 second.
Oh no. Gosh darn it. We had it. We were there. You're gone. Please.
He's pretty good. I think he's pretty good with technology, by the way.
I think I hope those glasses he's wearing are like the meta ones. We don't hear you. Nothing.
He's saying fuck.
What did he do?
He said he didn't do anything. I'm pretty good at lip reading.
What? This is record the episode and then you just transcribe everything that he says.
Lip reading.
He said,
he's looking at his, maybe he needs to
restart,
replug it in. Did you listen to the album? I mean, it's just on a side note.
Yeah, I did a couple times. Quick, 28 minutes, easy. Right. Like this, you talk about an easy listen. This was like
28 minutes.
Here he is.
Yeah. Finally, I don't know why I know it just said all of a sudden it said it unplugged. I'm not even touching.
Don't touch
anything.
Put the candle back.
All right, I told Morty that he should take the lead on this because I feel like he knows more about this album than I did, considering I've never bought a Byrds album in my life. So,
well, you just got them willed to you.
here's the thing, though. You give Morty that kind of responsibility, we might say three things the entire podcast.
Hold on.
He's
Well,
aware. I think he's aware.
We
of the
need
verbosity.
exposition. So let's break this down because you've done a Byrds album, right? Didn't you do Sweethearts of the Rodeo, or did you do?
No, we didn't.
You haven't done any?
We haven't done any Byrds, which is funny because I got this one. I know, Wayne, I got this one mixed up with the other group with having a rave up, dude. I thought
thinking of Buffalo Springfield or Yardbirds.
We did Buffalo Springfield a few weeks ago. I did that with Adam Ferreira, good buddy of the pod. We love him to death. But
yeah, we talked about that album.
Yeah, but we haven't done any.
By the way, both Byrds and Yardbirds are Byrds. So
they are.
Yes,
they are. But only one of them was an admiral.
Right. That was the one we had.
So I'm going to break it down. So here's the thing. This is the greatest thing about having done so many of these episodes is when I talk to Josh about them, there's so many overlaid things where I say, okay, remember when we did the Neil Young episode? Okay, remember when we had Lenny Kaye on and we talked about Sagittarius and
and it all leads to Daniel Lanois.
That's what it is, man. Look at the ambience.
Dude, we were saying when we were doing Rod Stewart, it was like up on the wall. It's just like the crazy string going and everything. And it's just like, yeah, man. And then Daniel Lanois. It's all.
This is one of those episodes where I'm going to be able to almost every statement directly draw a line to something you've done where I can go, Josh, remember?
Yeah. Okay. All right, let's do it.
So here we go. 1964, a band gets together in Los Angeles.
This is the height of folk. Smile on you, brother.
Very similar in a few more years. And by the way, well, I'm not okay. You remember when you do this, you're the one who sends me on tangents. Okay, so it's very simple. Band gets together. It's Jim McGuinn on guitar and vocals.
Jimmy.
Chris Hillman. Well, no, I'll explain that.
Okay.
Chris Hillman on bass and vocals. David Crosby on guitar and vocals. Michael Clark on drums and not Gene Clark.
Not the actor Michael Clark.
No, and Michael Clark with an E. And then Gene Clark without an E, no relation, on vocals and tambourine, as one does when you're a vocalist that can't play an instrument.
And your big hit is Mr. Tambourine Man.
That's why. I mean, it's right there in it. You look like a woman going to church on Sunday, Josh, with your little fan. So 1964, the guys get together. They see Hard Day's Night. Everybody goes, oh my God, what is this? The Beatles happen. Everybody sees John's Rickenbacker. And so they go, oh my God, this is fantastic.
Side note,
yes.
Your Honor.
I'll allow it.
Is Hard Day's Night, like when that comes out, is that like, the biggest movie at the movie theater? Is that just like take over? Or is it just like, it's just the Beatles, so we're just, but is it
the Beatles are not the Beatles yet. This is the year that the Beatles break in America. Mm-hmm. So this is like, the Monkees have a single out and then the Monkees television show goes on the air. And within that moment, it's everything.
I don't know if I quite agree with that, but I think the Beatles hit huge in the beginning of 1964. They had 5 number 1 singles on the chart. And then this movie comes out.
Right. That's what I'm saying but it was it's still considered part of.
Oh, it was part of the ascent, but they were huge. The Beatles and Ed Sullivan, this thing that Jim McGuinn saw saw Hard Day's Night, it was like the Beatles and Sullivan was the biggest watch television event.
Oh yeah,
until like the moon landing or something.
Right, wow. But remember that the television show predates like the movie and everything.
Of course.
And the movie was a cash-in. They were just kind of going, what's like the Suits would go, what's popular? Chaperone is popular right now. Put her in a movie. It would be like that. Like while her first. While she's on the radio still.
While she's hot.
Yeah, while she's hot. In 10 days, it's going to be gone. So let's just be exploitive. Right. But they ended up, but it ended up being incredibly engaging. And then, Dick Lester and the whole thing. So they go to see this. And, these are guys in bands that are not that much younger than the Beatles. This is a scalable place to get. This is like, hey, we could be in a band. This wasn't like we were looking at Little Richard, who had some years on them, or even Elvis that had some years on them. This was like guys kind of their age and this new wave. And, remember, not to discount it, Kennedy being shot was seismic in what that did to America, in what people were looking for, something refreshing for it. So they go to see it, they put a band together and they start playing. They also, listening to Bob Dylan, who now you've done recently on the episode we did with Dan Fogler.
Like him. I finally like him.
And Dan Fogler, talking about the era of the movie that he just did, which is Bob Dylan makes this sort of, Bob Dylan also starts seeing what the Beatles are doing. And there's a confluence of a lot of this stuff. So they become kind of a folky band. They find Bob Dylan as their muse, and they find, which is one of the most important things to the Byrds, which is the 12-string Rickenbacker guitar. You get that sound, that Jim McGuinn sound of that jangle, which is the jangle that is heard around everywhere, the echo in the canyon, that essentially becomes the sound of Laurel Canyon in the 60s. And
also of Sunset Strip.
Yeah, which is right above that. Then you end up with, so now we have the Bob. Okay, go on.
What I was going to say is Wayne, are you a fan of the Rickenbacker? Like, I know you're a guitar dude.
I like the Byrds, but I like their hits. Like they had an album before this album came out called The Byrds' Greatest Hits. They came out before this album, and that's
we'll explain that too.
That's where I'm at with that. Like I like their, but can I say a little sidebar before that? The whole point of this is, thank you for allowing it. The whole point of this is that they were a folk band, echoing what was happening in New York City in the folk scene there, but they were in California. And then when the Beatles came, they were like, let's get electric guitars and plug in and get a drummer and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
By the way, one of the epicenters, this actually affects you, Josh. One of the epicenters of that scene, of the folk scene, before it became the rock scene and moved up to Sunset Boulevard and all of those clubs, was a nightclub that had bluegrass singers. Jim McGuinn was part of this whole scene, called the Ash Grove. The Ash Grove later became the Improv. Same stage.
No way.
Yes. So when there's a great live recording of the Byrds at the Ash Grove, like that was before Bud bought it in the mid-70s. And turned it into the Improv. Back to you, Morty.
Wait,
that's amazing.
Morty, before you get into your shit, Wayne, I got to ask you this. You know that famous picture of John Lennon standing out in front? Is that in Hollywood?
That's a troubadour.
No. First of all, I know the picture you're talking about. That's the Improv in New York. Good.
Wait, which picture of you're talking about John Lennon at an improv?
Yeah. It's like I never saw it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like him standing out front. He's got on like the newsy cap and like a black coat.
That's from the New York Improv.
Oh, wow.
Where was that? Where was that?
44th Street and 8th.
Was that before the LA one?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure.
Yeah. Again, I wrote a book about it. Here we go.
I know that, but those pages were stuck together when I got it.
Oh, I see. Oh, you masturbated on the Improv?
Oh, that's always. Yeah, I usually start on the Laugh Factory.
That's why it's okay. All right.
Yeah. So where we are is
it is an interesting confluence though of just like Byrds are the rock band that like kicks off this LA scene.
But also connects it to Bob Dylan, because that's the part.
Of course. Yeah. But they're folky. They're folkies. Became rock guitar players, and then but obviously became the Eagle. The Eagles are like the end of this rainbow.
Something like that. But remember, because nowadays it feels like all you needed to do, like, you on the internet now and somebody's like, hey, look, what's big in Japan? And then you can sort of jump with it or, take off on it. This was like what would get on the air, who had a record coming out, and who was in your individual scene, literally in your individual scene at the time, what bands are around you. So the Byrds, without getting into too much, the Byrds, I guess, main rivals would be like Buffalo Springfield. They were another band that was very similar to them, that was influenced similarly, and moving parts. They knew each other, about the same age, played the same clubs, in the Strip, the Laurel Canyon scene. So we end up with the Byrds say, well, there's, Bob Dylan comes out, they find his songs, they say we could do these well. They start doing them, they start having hits. And now we are to get into this record. A few records before this, lead singer Gene Clark, who was having some anxiety issues, chiefly a fear of flying, like deathly afraid of flying. And he didn't want to tour anymore.
This is the connection to Josh's.
This is Josh's fear of flying. And he had bright pink hair.
I'm not afraid of flying. I just, because of what's been happening.
Yeah.
I like feel a little bit of like I don't know how you explain that word. Like, it just, I get spilkes. I guess spilkes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's anxiety. You have anxiety about, and by the way, absolutely legitimized with the amount of, of air travel, issues. So Gene Clark decides he doesn't really want to do this anymore. So he sets off to sort of do a solo career. He puts together a band. We don't need to get into it too much, except that the producer that he works with is a guy named Gary Usher, which comes back for this record. So they do this stuff. Now, in the meantime, you guys have heard of, a lot of people haven't heard of like the Magic Mountain Festival, which predates the Monterey Pop Festival. But the Monterey Pop Festival gets all the shine. But originally there's this there's this other festival a little earlier, Byrds play. And then the Byrds are to headline at Monterey Pop Festival. You've heard about this. This is like the big, be in, which essentially
talked about it many times.
Which sets sort of the table for where rock and roll goes into the psychedelic era, into this next step. So 66 leading over, we have the Pop Festival, the Association, Mamas and the Papas. There's a lot of jangle going on. Laurel Canyon's incredibly popular. The West Coast has a thriving scene that's insular from the New York time, which then at this point now has like Velvet Underground starting up, and a little more of like darker stuff going. Dylan is going electric. The Beatles, or remember at this time, Beatles have already done Rubber Soul and Revolver. And now at the beginning, in 67, they put out Sgt. Pepper's, which is a revolution unto rock and roll, and also as rock and roll being taken as little more than a fad for kids. Now it is decidedly, yes.
Question. So
I will allow it.
Thank you. Well, I didn't say sidebar.
Oh,
sidebar. This is not a sidebar.
Well, then motion denied.
This is a question. Is like, so the Beatles obviously are the biggest band in the world. When when Sgt. Pepper came out, is it really the thing? Like wherever all the critics, all the people are just completely like floored by it. Like, is it
June,
you know what I mean?
June 1st, 1967 came out. Yes, it was that album was played front to back on FM radio stations.
Wow.
For days.
In awe.
It wasn't just like, oh, we're just going to play the end song. Like the whole concept, the lyrics on the back. And it's interesting. It's just a side that now that album has dropped in esteem, but at the time it was obviously revolutionary. There's this great story of Jimi Hendrix that weekend, that Sunday, I think it came out maybe on a Friday, that Sunday doing a show in England and doing a cover of Sgt. Pepper's, that song on stage. And so, yes, it was that revolution. I'm trying to think of an album, Morty, that's like similar to that just really flipped the whole like music community. Even people that hated the Beatles were floored by what was going on.
The thing was, because the Beatles stopped touring in 66, then they put out Revolver sort of in the interim, and Revolver, which is because Sgt. Pepper came out, Revolver has lost some of the shine. To me, it's my favorite album of all time by any band, because every song on Revolver, you could see it sparking an entire like generation of music, whether it's Loops and Chemical Brothers, or whether it's, George trying to find, his spirituality on a song in 66, or Eleanor Rigby having the pop with a complete Baroque background. So when Sgt. Pepper comes out, the world goes Technicolor. All of a sudden, Jim McGuinn, because he's still Jim at the time, is wearing his little, now he's wearing granny glasses that are blue, and now they're selling them through magazines. Hey, get the Jim McGuinn Byrds glasses. It's become its own cottage industry of, hey, everybody get granny, takes a trip, clothing and fringe and freaky stuff. Okay, which lasts essentially about a year. And that's where this album sort of falls in. Then we've talked about how the band comes up, and then this authenticity and, wearing denim and black jackets, and this other thing sort of takes over. Even the Beatles go there. They start chasing sort of the band's clout after that. Shout out to Garth Hudson, who we just lost, the last remaining member of the band. So during this album, they do the Monterey Pop Festival. Now, this is a huge contribution to why this album is the way it is. David Crosby, who was already, admittedly, difficult to work with.
Why?
Because he's a pain in the ass. And by the way, when this record is re-released, when it's been re-released, they actually add like a 7-minute chatter of them in the studio arguing with Michael Clark, the drummer, trying to get him to play drums on, I think, Dolphin Smile. And they're trying to get him.
Why? Not so I didn't mean to cut you off, but why?
Because he was the drummer.
But no. But why is he difficult? Is he the main songwriter? Is he the main guy? I don't want to go on too many tangents because we've made this connection with like Graham Parsons and other things. He was raised as a pretty well-off child of his dad was in the industry.
Cinematographer, right?
Yeah. Like some of these other people. So, I forget if he's an only child, but, he's raised with some privilege, and he goes into this. And, when people first get into this, young men are probably like, hey, this is good. Chicks are around. Elvis Presley.
And also he was very articulate. So a lot of times he would take over interviews and he had opinions. And if I'm not mistaken,
he did.
He was loaded with and he thought very much of himself. I'm not going to say the word egomaniac, but he was certainly a confident young man. And if I'm not mistaken, at the Monterey Pop Festival, which is the summer of '67, is that correct?
Right.
Maybe July. But anyway,
yeah, because they were doing Sgt. Pepper's.
Yeah.
They turned it down.
They, he not only plays with Buffalo Springfield.
Well, that's some of the contention.
Yeah, and they're just pissed at the guy. And in between songs, he starts pontificating about the Kennedy assassination, on and on and on. And we're like, can we get to our hit song?
There's so he's
that kind of guy. Do you know what I mean, Josh?
Yeah.
I don't want to use the word arrogant, but it's almost that. But he was
and a talented fella.
Yeah, talented, funny, and
talented.
By the way, at the end of if you saw the documentary about him, at the end of his life, no one in Crosby, Stills, and Nash was talking to Crosby.
Right.
No one was, let alone recording with them, was talking to him.
Graham Nash, who had been the holdout of still remaining friendly with him, sort of like that was when he was even like, I can't hang out with him anymore.
Yeah. Anyway, that's a side.
So just to go into a tiny bit of detail of how this happens is they're supposed to headline the Monterey Pop Festival, and they're headlining it. They're going to film it. Everybody knows they're going to film this thing. Not only does he sort of go off on this tangent about Kennedy on the mic, where he's like, guys, he wasn't shot by one guy. He was shot by several people. People are being killed who know about this. He also says, and by the way, he attributes the quote to Paul McCartney, who says, the people in government should all be on LSD. They should all try LSD. So a few of these comments don't endear him, and the Byrds don't have the most stellar set, but also because Neil Young, we've talked about this in the Neil Young episode, because Neil Young dropped out of playing with Buffalo Springfield, he filled in which is him hanging out with Stephen Stills, which sets the seeds for Crosby, Stills, and Nash.
Wow. Yeah.
So for this record,
He
shows
connected,
up,
man. It's
right,
all Dandyland. Wow.
So let's start with Notorious Byrd Brothers. So for this record, he has his ideas and he has his songs that he's bringing in. Starts with Lady Friend, which is they work on for, which becomes a single, I think predates the record, doesn't end up on the album, but he does Lady Friend for this. He has his ideas. He's not happy with the way they all sing it. So he decides
David at this point.
David, yes, for this record. So he says, I'm going to go in and just basically record the vocal stacks and sort of without the band's, knowledge, without their agreement, I'm going to start doing this. And so they're already a little bit pissed and they know him. They've now worked for a while. Gene, remember, Gene's been out of the band for a couple albums. He's tried to have a successful solo career, but he hasn't. So he's over here, which is why we'll explain that in a minute. David, not only that, David starts bringing in songs like one of them, which doesn't end up on this album, but was recorded for this album, where the subject matter is very much contemporary to its time. He has a song called Triad, which is about him having a menage a trois. And it ends up on a Crosby, Stills, Nash record later. But he's like, hey guys, I got this song. It's about me and these two chicks. And they're like, yeah, I don't know. I don't know that we really want to start going down there for this. So the Monterey Festival is immediately bad taste in everyone's mouth. They're pissed. And then David just kind of stopped showing up to rehearsals and to recording sessions. So, and they usually do a lot of their songwriting where they actually put them on in the studio. They don't get together at like someone's house in their bedroom. They're doing this in the studio. So they start working with Gary Usher, who has previously worked with Brian Wilson, with the Beach Boys, with a lot of bands. He's one of the guys who co-wrote In My Room. He co-wrote In My Room with Brian Wilson. But he also was famous where during the 60s, the early 60s, he worked on a lot of these car song, surf song kind of like knockoffs, the Hondells. And, if there was a hit idea, he went, oh, we're going to do this song. So he wrote, Little My 409, which the Beach Boys covered. He was very instrumental in producing these knockoff fad pop things. But then he became very proficient in the studio. And like I said, when we did the Lenny Kaye episode, there are a lot of things and some other stuff that he's worked on with Kurt Betcher as partner. They did a lot of things where they worked with Musique Concrete, which was adding sound effects and adding instrumental sections that would pop in, which happen on this record. When we go into the songs, you'll see these moments. So they start working with this guy, and Crosby is here and there, a no-show. And then finally he shows up. And if you listen to the recording, which is amazing, of them in the studio working on this record, you'll hear David sort of taunting Michael Clark because Michael Clark can't really get a pattern that he wants for the drums. And they're doing this live in the studio. And the producer's kind of going, okay, guys, could we just try it again from the top? And then they start by the end of it, they're all kind of going, oh, is baby Michael not okay with... It's like, and if you've been in a band, you know this really well.
Why would they put that on the re-release though?
I don't think it would.
More of
it was just record. Yeah, it was something, an eye in the studio of the recording.
No, they put it on the re-release because David Crosby leaves the band. That's why.
So they
start kicked out of the band, or I don't know exactly.
That's exactly what happens. They start recording. They're ways into it. David is saying now. Gary Usher finds these songs by Goffin and King, who at this point, Carole King and her husband, Jerry Goffin, have written umpteen, and we did this on the girl group episodes, and several others, and Todd Rundgren has done umpteen hits. I mean, solid motherfucking hits. Right. But she hasn't broken through as a performer at all yet. She hasn't even moved to Los Angeles until 68.
Once this album was already out?
72. It's after Writer, which wasn't a hit. She had her first album come out, which didn't really do well. And then she had Tapestry come out. And that was the revelation of the Laurel Canyon scene. So at this
Even though
point,
she's a New York, I think she might be from Brooklyn. She's like,
yeah, absolutely. She's a brill building. They are brill building writers, which we've talked about.
That she became synonymous with Laurel Canyon is just an interesting little twist to the whole story. Because
most people weren't from LA that became very popular. David, but there were only a couple of them, with like Neil Young's Canadian. You know, it was a lot of these people just, you know, you moved from wherever you moved to, either San Francisco, wherever, and to make your dream in Los Angeles, because the scene, just like when everybody ran up to Seattle during grunge, it was like, well, that's where you're getting signed out of. Nobody's signing anybody in LA anymore. And so what happens is they get Gary Usher gets first crack at a couple of these singles. And he shows them to the band, he's like, listen, I think this song in particular, Going Back, would be great for you guys. And David Crosby, who, remember, at this moment in time, this is mid 67 to the end of 67. The Monkees are huge. The Monkees put out 3 records in 1967. So the Monkees are huge, but even though they are friends with a lot of the Laurel Canyon scene, and there is an authenticity because they played the Troubadour, you know, Mike and Peter were mainstays there and people knew them. And Mike, by the first Monkees album in 66, is already doing country rock music. And that's think of it that way. This is like the most popular teeny bopper thing. And he's doing sort of an obscure genre of music, which is very pertinent to sort of where this all goes, because he's also,
Question: is the Troubadour when you talk about, because I was talking to somebody about music venues, and they were like, you know, I think they were like, you know, New York has the Bowery, DC has the 930 Club, Minnesota has First Avenue, where Prince is from, or Prince started. Is LA the Troubadour, or is it the Whiskey?
Well, if you're talking about parallel bands to the eras that like 930 and those ones have, those would be newer clubs. But if you're talking about like Cafe Wah, and you're talking about what's the other one in New York? The big one, Bleecker.
No.
Bleecker, like the bands that like Bob Dylan would have played, and then the early folk rock bands would have played in that era.
There's also something called Gertie's Folk City was big.
Those would be the equivalent of like the Troubadour. The Troubadour had their Hootenanny Night, you know, the Whiskey and the Roxy didn't exist yet, and the Whiskey a Go-Go was the rock and roll, you know, that was more the
rocker place.
Yeah, Johnny Rivers. That was like, you know, and by the way, similar time period to the Doors and everyone, still 66. I mean, it's bizarre to think they all sort of happened at the same time, walking, bumping into each other and shopping and probably hanging out with the same women at the same time. But, you know, by 67, the Doors are already 2 records in. You know, there's a lot. I mean, there's all of this going on. Youth culture.
Definitely.
Youth culture. And now because of traveling, they're bringing this everywhere.
Don't forget, the Ash Grove was like before that, the Trube, like that was the folk, and then when it became folk rock, it moved to the Troubadour.
Yeah,
that's the way I remember.
Wait a second, I didn't know. Wait, hold on, Morty.
Box. Yeah, go on,
Morty. I didn't realize you were so close with the Troubadour that you could just call it the Trube.
Yes, and by the time I played there in the 80s, it was the Trouba Dump is what we called it, when it was like just in the hair metal, just post hair metal time. So
you got me.
So they go into the studio, and they are starting on this record. They record maybe 3/4 of the record, and they are just done with David Crosby, Chris Hillman. And so now here's what happens. Jim McGuinn gets into Sabood, and he decides that, I don't know if it's the numerals of his name, you know, if there's some kind of thing, but something tells him he should change his name to Roger. So all of a sudden he changes his name to Roger McGuinn about this time. So for this record, he's Roger McGuinn. So we'll just call him McGuinn from this point on, so that, you know, because people even then were still in that, oh no, now it's Jim. Okay. I mean, now it's Roger. Okay. So he becomes Roger McGuinn. McGuinn and Hillman are like, we can't do this. We can't do this with David anymore. You know, we got to get him out. So essentially They kick him out when they're about 3/4 through of this record. Michael Clark, the drummer, is disillusioned with a lot of what's going on. He doesn't really like the material. They've been a bit relentless with him. They're not happy. So he decides, guys, I'm not going to record anymore on this record. I'll still do all my obligations. I'll play live. I'll do whatever, but I can't do this. So they get in session greats, Hal Blaine from the Wrecking Crew, and also from the Wrecking Crew, and then from the Mother Wreckers, Jim Gordon, who we've talked about on Steely Dan records, and we've talked about a lot of stuff. He's the guy that ends up killing
Commissioner
his mom
Gordon.
with the hammer.
Commissioner Gordon.
He ends up
his best friend.
He's in Derek and the Dominoes. He's one of the most prolific drummers, along with Hal Blaine, who played on
who were Mike and the Mechanics?
That is an offshoot of Genesis. That happens quite a bit later. That also has Paul Carrack.
Not expect that question.
And by the way, I didn't miss a beat. Starring Paul Carrack, who also had a solo career, who also is the one who joined Squeeze and sang "Tempted" in Squeeze, who also was the lead singer in Ace, who had a hit with How Long. But we're not going to do that one today. We're going to finish this, and I'm trying to get through it quickly without tangent, but this is all important. David's out of the band. They contact Gene Clark, who hasn't had a great solo career. And they say, because Gary knows him, he's his producer, basically goes, hey, listen, man, you want to come back in and work with the guys, join the band again. So he comes back, contributes to some of the songs on this record. They finish off the record with, session drummers and with Gene. And then we go into 1968. David is still out. Michael, who is said, I'll do whatever. Basically, they say, yeah, okay, you're done. And then then Gene Clark is out again, whether it's because he just didn't really want to do the rigors of touring, and he was still anxious about everything. So he lasts 3 weeks. He lasts 3 weeks in the band to help finish the record, and then he's out. But because of all these moving parts, this ends up being the last record that has all the original members of the Byrds on it. And by the way, Gene's been out for a couple records. So this is the first time that they actually have all of them on. So we can go through, but then one other really important part about the cover of the album, because they go and shoot in Topanga. If you've seen it before, it's also used on a Linda Ronstadt album. I think Gary Webster shot it later. She's on the back in front of the exact same, but a different angle of this, little, I don't know if it was like where they kept the horses, whatever. But what ends up happening is they line up in these little windows, and then coincidentally, a horse sticks its face through the fourth window. And many people have taken it to mean that was a swipe at David Crosby, which presumably David took it as that. And even the band, when they shot it, kind of joked around because there's 4 windows. So it's the 3 remaining members of the band. It's, it's Roger in the middle. So it's, it's like Chris, Roger, Michael, and then a horse. And, and then it's the Notorious Byrd brothers, which has this kind of Western theme, and the windows are like these stone mason, whatever. So a lot of people took it to mean, because remember, he's on the album and he has songs that he actually wrote and sang on the album before they kicked him out. So in early 1968, so we don't know what 1968 is going to become in January.
Hold on. Wait, guys, this is now you want to wonder why I get nervous about flying, because I'm going to text Shane.
Oh, no, another one?
Dude. Southwest Pilot crazy collision at Midway in Chicago.
Oh my God.
Southwest Pilot almost had his wheels on the ground landing, had to pull back up. What the fuck is going on? Yeah, dude, it's crazy, dude.
Oh
crazy.
My God. So I guess the Reagan textbook of, hey, we should just fire all the air traffic controllers didn't work out the first time. Yeah. And now we're trying it again. Oh,
sorry.
Great.
Sorry.
Anyway, no, that's fine.
I thought it was on brand.
No, that's fine. That's fine.
Mechanics.
And Learning to Fly is actually a Buffalo Springfield song. So we end up on this record. It talks about very pertinent young people subjects, the draft, going to, war, ecology.
Before we get to these songs, just Is there any hit songs off of this record?
Not really, but there are some interesting. We'll do it in order, but there are some interesting things about some of the songs.
I get it, but I mean, again, I live sort of in the hit song world.
Of course, no, there is nothing on this record that you would say, "Oh yeah, they play that on K Earth." Ever. There's nothing on this record, even the best song on this record, which arguably we can all pick our own. There's nothing. There's no Mr. Tambourine Man. There's
no 8 Miles High.
No, there's no 8 Miles High. And by the way, so just to give
turn, there's none of that.
No, to give Gene Clark his due, Gene Clark also wrote 8 Miles High and a few of their hit songs that were theirs, because Turn is Bible passages, put to music, and then Mr. Tambourine Man and My Back Pages are obviously Dylan songs. Yeah. So they
why do you think this album is so highly regarded? Like, why is this on this list?
Because when you go back to this record,
right,
what's amazing about this record is, as fractious as the making and the recording of this record is, it's probably one of the most cohesive record by this band.
So what? So why is it that? So it's a cohesive album. Why is
I don't know where this I didn't look.
5-star reviews and stuff come from.
Right. But by the way, at the time, it was critically lauded, but it didn't do well commercially, but it was accepted as being an okay album. It just didn't connect with people, because I think they saw sort of the end of one era of music going into the other. It also is their most psychedelic record.
Okay.
But
this record? Wait, whoa. You're saying this is psychedelic?
The phasing on the instruments, which is when instruments are sort of close. When instruments are close in tone, there's a thing called phase, which is when you get like a buzzing sound from it. And they also use something which is I think Jeff Emmerich gets the quote for it, which is flanging, which is just something that he told John Lennon they were doing by putting things out of phase. What ends up happening is Jeff Emmerich would basically take two recordings of the same recording, and they'd put them a millisecond out of phase. And what would end up happening was give this sort of sound like this. And John would be like, "What do they call that?" And Jeff Emmerich said, "It's called flanging, John." That wasn't a real thing. It's just what he ended up calling it.
I was just surprised. As a fan, I mean, I like the Byrds. Again, never bought a Byrds album.
Sure.
I'm always fascinated by the bands that were always like Animals, Beatles, Crickets, Byrds.
Again, the name Byrd and notwithstanding.
I like all of
those. That's your
bands.
brand. You're like,
like they were just there was not very creative going on, Barry.
It was all Fetterman and Beasts.
He's like, Rolling Stones, go fuck yourself. Give me the Turtles. I like a fucking
Animals. My favorite was maybe the Animals,
because they encompassed everything you loved about music.
That's like your favorite.
Yeah, you were very much into Noah's Ark was the whole thing.
Or you could be a human being. Like I thought they were smart.
Oh, look at you branching out.
Yeah.
So what ends up? Oh, also Clarence White comes in and plays guitar on this record. By the time the next record comes along, he's a full-fledged member of the Byrds in the Graham Parsons era. He's a guitar player, very like a very country-esque guitar player who just comes and goes through these sessions. And they also have Red Rhodes, who plays slide guitar on this record.
Red Rhodes,
and Red Rhodes. Who is already is already a part of the Mike Nesmith world of 60s, which also brings him around. He's a slide guitar player, and then he dies tragically, which has a profound effect on Graham Parsons in '73 when he's in a band with his brother. And wait, Clarence White or Clarence Waters? I just blanked on.
Can we just take a second, though? I
just need to make sure I got that right.
No, figure it out. While you figure that out, Wayne, I want to give Morty his flowers, because, when what's his name, when Rory dropped out and we were looking through, and I'm like, well, I want Federman, obviously. And I was like, we should have Morty on too, obviously, because he's gonna know everything. I don't know if Wayne knows everything. We can't back to back Wayne. We got to throw the fucking wedge in.
It would have been a triple.
I know, but this is the
Rod Stewart Byrds.
I don't think those are in order. No, because the Carpenters was a few weeks ago. We had you did
within 3 weeks.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the thing is, I when I reached out to you, Morty, you said, I just don't know enough about him. And then you've just spoke.
I know.
Okay, but I know about them. This record, no, but this record. So the other,
and but can I also say this about Morty is I feel like he's holding back a lot of other tangential information.
I'm trying not to go there. I know what I can do.
I can see it. I can see it's paining.
It's no, but it's difficult. It's like, you know,
it's difficult.
I want to stay pertinent.
Just Morty, in any way, can you, like when you're saying, or like, does it ever go through, like, is this relevant to the story? Do you ever think about anything like that?
Yeah, because I try to make everything I'm saying so far relevant, specific to this album too. Like Clarence White plays guitar on this album. He ends up, playing with the Byrds. He ends up becoming a full-fledged member of the Byrds for the next record, Sweetheart of the Rodeo. And he's still with Gary Usher, produces that too. They get Graham Parsons in, and then they become what we know as the country rock version of the Byrds, which there are hints of it on this record.
Which is,
when
by
we go
the way,
through the songs.
I know what you said. I want to slow it down a little bit. There's a slight difference between folk rock and country rock.
Huge difference.
What is it? Because I think they're both the same thing.
Right. And we're gonna learn right now from more. But I'm just saying, like, the Byrds definitely envelop both of those genres. Correct?
Yes, and they are instrumental. They are at ground zero of folk rock. For folk rock specifically.
Wow.
And country rock. But remember, even folk music, by the idiom, the term folk music is the music played by folk, the music played by the people that did this, which were folk songs passed on from other people, protest songs about, and then we go back to the Dylan stuff, songs about things that didn't get the shine when they should have, people that were murdered, people that were,
Tom Dooley,
and John Henry, and songs that were almost tone poems that were just made.
What was that song that Joan Baez sang at Woodstock about the guy that the Union guy that gets killed?
I'm blanking.
I'll think of it in a second.
You don't really want to start me on a Woodstock tangent.
No, I don't. Right. Believe me, no one was.
No, neither do I. Trust me, I'm exhausted. Wait,
I got it. It came to me. Joe Hill,
another Joe. There's a Joe on this record too. Yeah. And so folk music is the music that's passed on. A lot of times melodies were added, taken from other songs, added old blues songs, just so they could keep the storytelling going. Yeah. It was a very storytelling thing. It was very much music in the minstrel era of passing town to town, bringing the news to each people, the real minstrels, not the Al Jolson circuit, like minstrels in the Shakespeare era of people. People didn't get mail. There was no way people would show up in your town and tell the story of the kings and queens of another town. And that's how you'd learn them, lies and all, like anything you'd hear through these people passing on, test the tale of what the town and what of is the town. And that's how you learn that, whether it was true or not. So that
was my prom theme. That song you just
said. That was. And you, by the way, you looked amazing in your tights and jodhpurs. Yes. Yeah, I think that was. Where did you graduate?
That you knew that song, but that was. It was
yeah. Well, that's how it came to our town. Some of the details were a little long.
And Seasons in the Sun, and it ultimately went.
I will take anything over Rod McEwen put to music by Terry Jacks.
Wait, what really were your like prom songs? I think we were.
What was your
the
theme song?
Time to remember.
What is that from?
It's Billy Joel.
That was the song from
days.
The days. Gotcha.
They will not be.
Was that out at the time? Was that out at the time when you graduated?
Yeah, it already. No, it wasn't like a big song.
It was a callback.
I'm pretty sure it was that. It was either that or I get knocked down, but I get up.
Well, that's
again.
obvious.
Is it ever going to take?
Yeah. Well, that's a word about perseverance. That really is something to send kids off onto their way with the mortar board. Is something like that. And also a great drinking song, which is probably where half of your classmates ended up. Yeah. So we end up
everybody died.
but me. They had a whiskey drink, they had a lager drink, they had a rum drink, and then they died. And I got up, and that's why you're here. So we're on this record. They finally finished this record. So the one other thing, and I was going to make sort of a connection, which ends up, well, we can do it in the song by song, but remember 1967, Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, huge record. Doors are now out there. Love is out there.
3 Monkey records.
3 Monkeys records. And
I think I can name them. Monkeys. More of the Monkeys headquarters.
No. Yes. Up until this one. And so what you have to remember is Goffin and King were part of the Brill Building writers that Don Kirshner would bring to the Monkees and bring to other acts and say, hey, these kids have written some great songs. How about? So Goffin and King were there with Man and Weil, who we've talked about on the Phil Spector episode.
Yep.
We talked about on the girl group episode. We talked about on, a lot of these you'll hear a lot of these names start coming up, as well as Neil Diamond, Neil Sedaka, Paul Williams, even at Simon and Garfunkel, even Paul Simon fancied himself like a Brill Building writer in his time. These guys all wanted to, because when songwriting happened, these guys were they were cranking out hits from this office in New York, and another one nearby, where they were just like, hey, you got a band? We got a hit. And that falls off as we go into like 1968, 69.
And the reason for that is a lot because of the Beatles were like,
wrote
we're
their
writing
own songs.
Dylan, we're writing your own songs.
Yeah, they loved, don't get it wrong, Beatles loved the songs that had been coming out. And that's what inspired them to say, well, let's try our version of this, which caught on with them doing it. But by mid 60s, there's an authenticity to artists, which was not just, can you play other people's songs? Because that's what you would have been doing in the circuit. In the circuit was kids wanted to go and dance. That was what discotheques were. You would go to the Whiskey a Go-Go and you would dance to a band playing songs of the day. So this is a big reason David Crosby had an issue with this. David Crosby's like, hey guys, we write interesting songs. Why the hell are we still doing covers if we've already done Dylan and that already set us up? And not just covers of Dylan, which is hip. Right. We're doing fucking songs that the Monkees might have been pitched.
Well, right. And might have,
you know what I mean? Legitimately, like, then you've got stuff like, it's the next record, but the single Pleasant Valley Sunday and stuff, which is written by Goffin and King. Right. You've got songs that, for all intents and purposes, the Monkees might have turned down. The association might have turned it down. All their contemporaries, they're like, guys, I'm writing songs about humping 2 chicks. That's cutting edge. I'm writing songs about mermaids smiling and psychedelic shit. Really? We're going to go back to doing songs about, being, nostalgia. Yeah, exactly. So that's another big part of this going into this record. So now we can go song by song.
Well, I mean, we gotta, like, let's kind of summarize the songs, because we've already done.
For a record that has no hits, there's actually some really.
Well, what's your favorite one, Morty?
Let's talk.
Well, let's start with the first song. Like, name the first song on the record. Let's have any of us just have our opinions on the songs. Because I love the
song
Fleece
on the
Army.
record is Artificial Energy.
And this is probably the best song that is mostly written as a positive about taking speed, which is what the song is about. Is like, you're not going to hear a lot of sort of pro-amphetamine use songs in rock and roll.
Question. Raise your hand if you've tried crystal meth.
I have.
I have not.
Really?
Not crystal meth. I did
his sister Priscilla meth.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
I don't like the Folgers version.
He was flying his plane at the time. He didn't want to get caught up in any upside down turbulence. And by the way, this song ends with, I think the moment that this song sort of goes, well, it can't be all pro amphetamine, ends with him going, now I'm in jail because I killed a queen, which presumably means he killed a
Before we even get to
transvestite.
these songs, I want to go back to something that Josh Adam Meyers said earlier, that the whole album, I'm looking at the lengths of these songs. There's
Short.
only two songs.
The last song is the long one.
Yeah. And there's one song that's a minute 49 seconds. The entire album is 28 minutes.
Well, they kept firing everybody. You know how hard it is to keep it. You're like, we have a verse, a chorus, a bridge, and we just fired David. All right, that's where that song ends. You know, and that's what it is. But also at the time, they had done hit records. They had done Fifth Dimension. They did whatever together, whatever.
These are the albums Wayne liked. These are the albums Wayne.
Right, but that's what I'm saying. Up until this record, this is a distinct sort of period between the Byrds.
And just so you know, for me at this point, 68, as you know, Josh, I'm listening to Jimi Hendrix. I'm listening to the Guitar Hero guys.
First run.
Yeah, I'm listening to Cream. I'm listening to those. Those are more what's hitting my ear, as well as obviously the Beatles.
And that's what's amazing about the generational thing for you, Wayne, is that when we talk about, we can only talk about this as classic rock. You're talking about it as that's what was top 40.
Right.
You know, and that's people like, even like my kid today, if I'm talking to her about top, I'm like, at some point you're going to look at Beyonce like Madonna, which is she's always existed in your world, but she's still relevant. Whereas Madonna has never meant anything to my daughter. She's always been in her 40s or 50s by the time she was born. Yeah. Even though we're like Madonna, but you know, the equivalent to this was, like you said, Perry Como was just waning. Frank Sinatra was just waning. By 68, they still had some comebacks left in them.
I know. Again, I don't want to get it's
no.
That wasn't my point. My point was more just that
you had better stuff to listen to.
For me, again, one stupid kid in Florida. It's not. I don't really speak for anyone. Or
well, you speak for the listening public, too, because this record wasn't successful.
Right. That's all. I'm just trying to contextualize it as opposed, you know, like
which I think, which is what you pointed out, which is why is this on the 500 when they themselves have probably 2 or maybe 3 more important records. This is
popular.
Where, or even important. This record goes. We have.
This can't be their only album on the list, is it?
I don't think so.
I'm sure Sweethearts of the Rodeo has got to be on there because that's Graham Parsons.
Let me check we do the next.
Every Graham Parsons record on. So anyway, so for this song, this has weird horn stabs, and this is a really good. Not only is this a showcase of the Byrds, this is a showcase of Gary Usher, and this shows a lot of what. And remember, Sgt. Pepper's been out. We're in the same months away from Sgt. Pepper. So, you know, think about it this way is everybody has been inundated with Sgt. Pepper and the psychedelic experience of these kind of bands at this moment. So the idea of like, let's just have horn players come in and blast away is not, this is contemporary. This isn't like they went back and did a Sgt. Pepper's. This is like Sgt. Pepper's is still charting while they're doing this.
Hold on. So this is the second. We did do a Byrds record.
I told you.
Crazy. This is the second of 4 times we're talking about him. We spoke.
You do Mr. Tambourine Man, or
wait,
we did Mr. Tambourine.
We do 4 Byrds. 4 Byrds.
4 Byrds. There's 4 Byrds.
Okay, 4 different Byrds.
4 different Byrds. There's the Oriole.
Right.
There's you Baltimore get to shine.
Yeah.
Right. So we did Mr. Tambourine Man with Judy Gold. That was in 2 years ago. 233. Yeah. Well, yeah, I guess so. I mean, it was at least, God damn, it's crazy to think about that. That 233 was like almost 2.5 years ago. Younger Than Yesterday. That is below this one. Sweetheart of the Rodeo is down to 120. And then on the re-rank in 2020, this this did. Wait, hold on. Let me just double check because I got this.
Because I could see this getting bumped off for anything.
So it says on the 2020 Sweetheart of the Rodeo fell. So it goes to 274. Mr. Tambourine Man fell 54 spots to 287. And this and Younger Than Yesterday did not make the cut.
Right, which is what I assumed.
And I'm going to guess that Bad Bunny took their place.
Yes.
For this one?
Yep.
Sure.
Which is
Sure.
which speaking of Florida was probably your high school's
Yamana
current.
gasolina.
You did Daddy Yankee. You got them all mixed up.
That's my
Do
guess.
we all sound the same to you?
So two of them made okay, but still,
Yeah.
Mr. Tambourine Man is still on there.
Right, which is what you said. That's the record. And so right before this record came out,
Right.
the record label was sort of like, let's hedge our bets, and they put out the greatest hits album. So now they're competing.
So wait, hold on. So then still,
Yes,
if Mr. Tambourine Man is the record with
Mr.
the
Tambourine
hits,
Man.
then why is this record below it on the list? And why is it? Yeah, I don't get it.
You mean why is it higher on the list?
Yeah, that's what I meant. Yeah.
Because presumably, I'll use that word again, in 2011 when they were putting this together, it was probably a lot of certain white men of a certain age that were putting this together, and they were like, we're going to give Bob Dylan 75 records, and anybody that comes out of the Bob Dylan world, we're going to give every one of their records that sort of has that there. Is it influential?
And if I'm not mistaken, the Rolling Stone magazine begins in 1968. So this is like their birthing process, right?
Was it? I thought it was maybe 68. I know John's on the cover doing How I Won the War. So yeah.
So maybe earlier than that. Maybe
66. I think it was 67 or 68. We could look that up. But like I said,
No. This is the sweet spot for Rolling Stone, the writers, John Landau, all of those guys. This is their
this is the pivot.
This is their coming of age music, so they're gonna love.
And this is the pivot, but this is also, like I said, this is the pivot record. This is the record where we go jangly, folky, psychedelic, blah blah blah, boom, and then immediately the next thing they do is country rock, like pioneers. It's Queen. Where Graham Parsons and now Clarence White is in the band.
Okay, so it's November 67 Rolling Stone begins. So I was close.
At the end, which is right as this is happening.
Yeah, so it's this is an
this is probably the one that was playing while they were smoking doobage in the bathroom. Yeah, and they were like, dude, this is the records for me, man. So there's records like that we all have, which is why in our podcast, I'm interested in what you guys have in that space, because there's stuff that means stuff to you that we might not have ever happen.
Dig that.
So
let's dig that.
So the first song is pumping and bumping with all these horns and saying. The second song, which is the contention with David Crosby, going back, is the Goffin and King song, which is the single for this record. After Lady Friend is the single for this record, and from the 10 seconds into this song, you go, that's the Byrds.
Right.
They on this song, which isn't one they wrote, sounds more like the Byrds than almost anything else on this record.
I have a hunch that might be my favorite song on the album.
Yeah,
me too. Me too.
And with Goffin and easily.
I just feel like I don't have sophisticated
it's a great pop song.
Yeah, I'm drawn to that more than
so am I.
More experimental. So
I told that to Josh. That's the same thing I said, which is you play Radiohead.
I love Taco Bell. This is why I love Taco.
That's why. And both Taco and Bell recordings, putting on the Ritz, and then anything that Tom Bell ever did, and anything from the disco era of Bell Records, which I believe is "Rock the Boat" by the Hughes Corporation.
Rock the boat, don't rock the boat, baby.
All right, let's keep going down.
So anyway, going back is not a hit, but really showcases what the band does well when they get out of their way and sort of just go at it. I think are you
talking about going back still?
Going back, yeah, because I think it's worth that. It's probably one of the best songs.
And also, I think the Columbia record realized, this sounds like a band called the Byrds.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, this song, when Carole King ends up coming to Los Angeles the next year, she puts together a band called The City with Danny Korchmar, who we've talked about playing guitar with James Taylor and playing Warren Zevon and a million other people. He puts together a band that's unsuccessful that does this song also. Because Gary Usher got early versions of these songs and went, I'm going to give this to the Byrds, and nobody's turning that down.
Right. And Gary Usher never recorded Usher, did he?
No, well, I could say yeah, but no.
Nice.
Okay.
Now that's an Usher joke that only you and I got, Josh.
That's how we,
I don't
that's
know
how
what
we
that means.
get.
I don't
That's
know
how we
what that
get
means.
the young
Exactly.
kids to listen.
Yeah. Which is also every Everclear song. Okay, so move on to number 3. What's number 3? Let's see if
Natural Harmony.
Natural Harmony, which I think the record should have been called Artificial High and Natural Harmony. Isn't that a better name for a record? I saw that. That's like a great comedy name for an album if those are your 2 bits.
I do like it. I do like
Natural
it. That's
Harmony.
the first thing I've agreed with that you've said today, but
Absolutely, which sets the precedent. So yeah, I think if we have this song, I like this song. I think it's a good song, and I like the idea that it's natural harmony and it has a kind of a hippy dippy sort of element to this song.
Well, it is interesting. It's the only song on the album that's written by one person, Chris Hillman. That's the bass player, right?
Yes, and by the way, the bass playing on this record is pretty phenomenal. For what it is at the time, Chris Hillman's bass playing is very lyrical, like in a Paul McCartney way. There's some great stuff where the bass might just be like, do, 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 do.
By the way,
already beautiful.
Side note, not a sidebar. Chris Hillman used to be in a band called Hillman.
The Hillman?
No, it's called Hillman. I think that was the name of his band. Let's keep going.
Yes. So what's the next song?
Draft Morning.
Draft Morning. What I love about this, and the reason I'm wearing this is Gary Usher. Are you a fan of the Firesign Theater?
Of course.
But did that ever get okay? Firesign Theater, Josh, who's listening. Firesign Theater was a group of 4 guys who started on public radio, KCRW, I believe. Santa Monica radio.
David Proctor.
Phil Proctor.
Yeah.
Bergman, Proctor. Now that I'm trying to remember, it'll come to me. But the point being, they were like head radio. They did a lot of which in the old days, in the 20s, and would have been like The Shadow, and a lot of stuff you'd make up in your heads of sitcoms. They started doing head radio, which was they would write scripts that were very much of its time, contemporized, and with a lot of radio play sort of panache, which were amazing. So they were produced by Gary Usher for their first record, Waiting for the Electrician or somebody like him. They are on this song doing the sound effects for this song at Firesign. They're the four Firesign, or at least they're credited as the 4 Firesign Theater members for this song on here.
Sound effects. I see it.
Yeah. So that's the connection. That's another connection to head, to very contemporary head music, sort of hippie, of the moment type stuff for this one. But, we're talking about a draft song. This is the perfect time to be writing songs about going to war and about what happens, the morning of getting your draft notice. And, this is the Vietnam War is going to go on for another 8 years. So it is right in the middle of absolute abject terror by a lot of these same people who have seen their friends die, who have seen, this is why Hair comes out, all of this stuff. So I think that's whether the song is as pertinent now, the subject matter, of course, which very well these days could be something that comes back up again. Next song.
It is interesting that Hair, the musical, came out in '68 also. Wasn't Born to Follow. This is another Carole King.
This is the other one.
Yeah, this is the second. Could have been a Monkees song, right?
I think it's still a good song. And here's the other thing. When Easy Rider came out,
going back, right?
I don't think it is, but here's a nice connection to the Monkey Camp. And then through it, Jack Nicholson. Monkees put out Head in 1968, the next year. That's why. Then the reason they came up with that is they wanted to be able to say about the next movie by the guys that gave you Head. Right. And so the Rafelson and I put it out of order. The guys that created the Monkees with Jack Nicholson. Wazerski worked with them, but
it was Bob Rafelson
and
I can't think of that dude.
Oh my God, I just blanked, and I'll get it in a second. But anyway, Easy Rider, which is the movie that the success of the Monkees made, really. This is the song. Right. Yeah, this is the song that was used as the single for Easy Rider.
Right.
by the Byrds. So, and it still didn't do well. Most people would say, I think, inarguably, the hit from that would be Born to Be Wild.
Right.
To
Yeah.
be wild,
Steppenwolf.
Mike and the Mechanics.
Yep. And you probably know the cult version from Electric, which is around when I was graduating high school.
So that is interesting because that movie, again, there was a number of movies, but that was really the one that sort of ushered in
absolutely
new Hollywood, where
Easy Rider, yes. And we want to know, because I studied this in college in the new Hollywood era. What's the movie that basically tanked and made them go, we should give these younger guys
Dr. Dolittle?
Nope.
What do you mean? The movie that tanked that
Cleopatra.
wasn't by
Cleopatra.
Oh, a big budget, old school.
Cleopatra was, at least that's what Professor Tishkin at the Towson University,
who may or may not be Jewish.
It was
Cleopatra. They did lose a ton of money. But
Bert Schneider. Bert Schneider was the other guy. Bob Rafelson and Bert Schneider.
Right,
and Paul Mazursky helped direct and helped develop the Monkees TV show. So this song was used, another Goffin King, which, honestly, maybe they only needed one. I mean, it's still a good song, but maybe they really only needed one, but it still sort of carries the hippie ethos.
Of course, it's used in Easy Rider makes it classic. Okay.
Yeah. And the fact that,
the final song inside one is called Get to You.
Yeah.
Roger McGuinn, Chris Hillman, but they say it's possibly
Hillman didn't write it. It's probably a Gene Clark song. Oh, okay. And it's been corrected. I think Roger McGuinn's even said, Chris Hillman, I think, said, actually Gene probably wrote that in his 3-week tenure with us back here, which, by the way, he leaves the band, drummers out by the beginning, but by this album coming out, like I said. So, you have to imagine this band is down to 2 guys when this record comes out.
Amazing.
Even though the singles and stuff have artwork, still have Dave Crosby on it and have, and some Michael and Michael Clark on it. So they, Get to You is a good song. I mean, I think it's a good sign to end side one.
Fine. It was fine.
Then side 2, you didn't like it. Is
Change is now.
I mean, I think that's it's another. I think it's a David Crosby song, right? It's another one of these sort of.
It says Hillman and McGuinn.
Oh, Hillman and McGuinn. It's a very of its era.
We don't know if we're talking about Jim McGuinn. We don't know if we're talking about Roger.
No, neither did he.
In between. Yeah.
No, neither. He should have hyphenated his name. Jim Roger McGuinn.
Imagine.
J.R. McGuinn. Yeah, would have been perfect for country. And
another Hillman McGuinn thing is called Old John Robertson.
Right, which is the most countrified song on this record, which really is the direction the band goes on by the next record. And we talk about Red Rhodes, the slide guitar player, who played with everybody. He was one of the most famous slide guitar players from the Wrecking Crew era, who played with like every one of these country acts, but chiefly Mike Nesmith when he went solo in the early 70s.
Definitely a big part of this scene. Guess the length of Old John Robertson.
It doesn't even begin.
I'm looking at
it. So negative 47 seconds. Okay. Oh no, I know how short these songs are.
Yeah, but side note, not sidebar. When Burr,
I will listen to it.
When Burr went to the SNL 50th, sitting next to him, Bonnie Raitt, speaking of
wow.
And he's like
amazing.
She was awesome. Got to talk to her,
And we've done Bonnie Raitt records
twice. We did it very early on with Fortune Feimster, and then I forgot. Oh, and then we did Nick of Time with who was the guy?
And by the way, another musical artist. Another musical artist who comes from the Hollywood industry. Her dad, John Raitt, was an actor.
Of course, famous Broadway actor.
All right, let's skedoodle through these three so we can get to
Tribal Gathering, Dolphin Smile, and Space Odyssey.
Tribal Gathering is another one of the. I think Crosby is Dolphin
Space
and
Odyssey.
Tribal.
I am Roger McGuinn, but call me Jim. I'm floating through.
Let's just get through these two real quick.
Yeah.
tribal gathering, perfect after Monterey Pop and all this stuff and Woodstock to come. It makes the correlation with tribes and tribal and this Native American thing that sort of connects it in this sort of hippie way, which really is a big part of sort of what has happened. But the what's to come part, where everyone's walking around with feathers, and that really happens kind of after this era, and from 68 on. And then you have Dolphin Smile, which is another one of these David Crosby sort of, hey man, this is the song that you can listen to them fighting over in the studio because Michael can't get the rolling drum thing they want, and then they berate him. It's only 7 minutes. It's worth listening to, because it's not as good as the Trogs tapes, which you'll find on your own.
Not to be confused with Live, the band from York, Pennsylvania's song Dolphins Cry.
Or Mermaid Smiles by XTC on Skylarking.
By the way, have you guys seen, there's a video that comes around on my social media every once in a while of this very beautiful girl named Amy, kind of like a neo-hippie Fish fan, and she's being interviewed outside of a Fish concert. She's the most beautiful woman you've ever seen, in my opinion. I mean, it's like a girl that I would have like gone head over heels in love with, but it's always pops up and it gets fucking like 20 million views because she's just so beautiful. But she's like got, she's got like
the accoutrement of,
she's got like runaway train singer hair, you know what I mean? Like nasty dread.
Who was a guest on the show.
Oh yeah.
A burner. Yeah, but anyway,
speaking of which, I think he did not do Minutemen. Did he do?
Yeah, he did.
Double
yeah, he did. He did double nickels on the dime.
But I got when I was in Minnesota, I bought a Husker Du shirt, which is, I don't know. I thought Minnesota. Yeah. It's all connected.
Because nothing says hippie. Nothing says hippie like buying a $900 Husker Du punk rock T-shirt.
Most expensive shirt I've ever bought. I got it.
That's more than they spent on that record.
By the way, you understand that this podcast is already double the length of the actual album.
It's actually not. We started 10 minutes in. We actually, if we cut off all the extraneous stuff at the beginning, we're about an hour and 10 minutes at that.
Okay, cool.
So anyway,
I want to get to our thing. I want to stop.
No, I know. So let's get to the last song on this record, the longest song. And remember, when this song came out, the movie hadn't come out yet. Just like Space Oddity, the book was huge. The Arthur C. Clarke 2001 book was very inspiring to a lot of people, but the movie hadn't come out yet, so people didn't know what they were going to get, which was another zenith of cinema by the time that came out. I mean, whether you like it or not, it's the next year that it actually gets made.
It comes out in 68,
2001. Yeah. What I'm saying is this record's done and comes out in January 68, but the movie doesn't come out. But the other thing is, maybe there's a bit of a cynicism to like, hey man, we don't know what this movie is going to do. Easy Rider's using one of the songs. Maybe 2001 will want to use one of our songs. I mean, I could see them saying, I don't think it's far-fetched to think, hey, if we have a song called Space Odyssey.
Because they were in production of that movie.
Maybe they'll use our song, Kubrick or someone will like this song and use it on the soundtrack. So now, Josh, I think we've done service to this record. We know it's not on anymore.
You want to do the wrap up
quick?
Yes. Final questions, and just so everybody knows, like this is, if you want to hear more of this, if you've been listening to this record, which I'll promote at the beginning and the end, we are going to be starting our own thing with me, Morty, and Wayne, and we are going to be talking. Maybe we might just, you never know, the Byrds might make their way into it, but it's going to be so much fun. So subscribe to the Patreon. Patreon.com/the 500 podcast, and you will get more of us, because I don't think a three top has ever been so good together.
Never. And I love Smartless, and I will have to say this will be the run for the money.
Don't promote our.
I love them. Bill Burr's on right now, so I'm giving props to Bill Burr for being the guest on the
good old Billy Burr. All right, what's our favorite song on the podcast? On the
mine.
I think going back is mine still.
Same. I think we all agree on that.
And I'm a huge Goffin and King fan, and then obviously King goes on to incredible stuff. But even the stuff they do with the Monkees, I think this is a close run of what
It's
we
pretty
would have
good
gotten.
song. It's a
Yeah,
good.
this is
And
almost a Great Monkeys record.
I like the way it sounds like a band called the Byrds. That
Yeah.
impresses me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything we skip over?
I'm not a big fan of Space Odyssey. It's just a little. It's unnecessarily long.
I didn't love Dolphin Smile, to tell you the truth.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was too.
I'm not gonna lie. A lot of like, I didn't hate the record, but it's also like nothing. This is a very forgettable album. Like,
I know that. Again,
Yeah.
if you look at the reviews, 5-star, all music, 5-star. It's
But a lot
interesting
of
to
those
me.
are later. A lot of those are retrospective reviews. You have to check.
Sure, but that's the thing, is that I'm looking at this now as a guy that has never. I didn't know about
Sure.
it, and it's like, and then you have these things, because especially if we're talking about on that first episode, what record do we feel has been dropped off or should have been on the list?
Okay.
I mean, I could name 10 albums that should have replaced it.
Okay.
So I don't see why.
Sure.
I see why this.
And the
didn't make
minute
it.
I saw this, I went, "Yeah, there's no way this is still on the list."
Yeah.
Like the minute
Right,
I was
right,
looking
right,
at it,
right.
listening to
All
it.
right. Can we fuck to this album, or for Wayne, can you heavy pet or neck? Can we neck?
Well, it's been so long since I've had sex. Is a refractory period allowed to be like years?
I don't think you can fuck to this. I don't think.
I don't know. I
you-
can't.
I think you can.
imagine. I can't imagine.
Here's the thing: if you
making
fuck
out
quick,
with a girl to Old
Yeah.
Man Robertson, I just can't imagine.
yeah, but if you fuck quick, you can be done before the good songs run out.
That's true.
Yeah,
If I
if you-
take Viagra, I got to go through three of these of these albums
right.
before.
That's the
I
hard
can
part. Yeah,
go.
you can get 7. If you can get like a good 7 minutes, then you can finish before the kind of the harder songs to listen to come in.
What would be our? How do you pitch this to somebody? How do you get someone to listen to this?
I love
You've
it.
never, you've never heard this, and you likely never will. So, let's do it quickly so we can have sex to it later, and I won't sing along.
Yeah,
If
promote
you're
it.
interested in the nexus of folk rock, folk country, this is kind of a transition period for a band that was at the vanguard of that scene in Los Angeles as they were kind of disintegrating. I know that's a long pitch for
No, it is.
It's great.
I think this would make the story of this record is actually better than the actual
the
record.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is that
But
why
I
it's
think
on here?
that's-
Then is it the
I think
story?
I think
or-
it's pretty compelling. I think it's pretty
Yeah.
compelling to hear a band crumbling while it's being made with this many moving parts and still be
All right.
considered a big band.
Question, and this is I think a good way to wrap this up, and this is where our podcast will come in even more fruitful. Is there another record where you've had this much what's the word I'm looking for? Yeah, a tumultuous recording where it's like you're the same the shit that's going on. Is there another record where something great came out of
people were being
Abbey Road?
Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, really, what we end up with Let It Be comes out of what we've seen in the movie of so many different, of so many sort of heads bumping together, and but those all kind of tie together, and some volunteers. I mean, some of the Jefferson Airplane stuff.
Man, I wouldn't.
Which, by the way, Triad. David Crosby gave the song Triad to Jefferson Airplane first, and then did it later.
Well, let's do this. Let's wrap this up. Let's dive into ours and, promote away everybody. Morty, where do they find you?
You can find me on all social media that isn't run by fascists, or probably some that are, at DJ Morty Coyle, DJ MortyCoyle, and then on TikTok and on Instagram, we still have the Bean Daddy cartoons, which is now a legacy thing, but with fun music that you might not have heard or that you did hear and sing with your kids. Live long, everybody.
Wayne.
Oh, and All Day Suckers. Sorry, my band.
Jesus.
Listen to them. Sorry.
I've seen All Day Sucker, by the way.
Yeah, and go to Kibitz Room tonight, Tuesdays, and every Tuesday, where Wayne shops in when he's at the theater.
I love it. I am on X/Twitter. I have not given up on that, at Federman. And I also knee deep in 2 documentaries, one on Mel Brooks and one on Norm Macdonald. That I
can't wait for that Norm one.
That's my day job. And I'll be at Largo with Sarah Silverman on the 14th of March.
Oh wow!
right
I
on.
might. I
What?
get in. I'll be in Milwaukee, but
Is that a
do we have-
Friday the 14th? I think that's
yeah, it
right,
is.
right? Yeah,
14th, 15th, and then 16th, 17th is when I'm doing the jam.
Oh my
and
God!
shimmy.
I might come down to see you guys if
Oh
there's
my
any
God.
tickets still.
I
It might be
Sold
sold
out.
out.
Sold
It's
out.
Is it
Sarah
sold out?
Silverman. The show is called Sarah Silverman and Friends.
Oh, yeah.
I'm one of the
Yeah, it's
Friends.
like she and Apatow do those where they sort of have like a great run,
Yeah,
just an
yeah.
incredible list.
Oh,
I'll see if I
many.
can sneak in. I'll see if
All right.
I can sneak in.
All right.
Yeah.
For everybody else out there, man, guys, subscribe to the Patreon. Subscribe to the Patreon. I'm really excited to start doing this, and this is going to be the first one. So dig into it, and obviously, I'll see both of you guys on the podcast very soon.
Yes.
Skadoodle.